the arraignment. Waldemar
Plea to this indictment. Guilty or not guilty?
Nicht schuldig.
Lothar Fendler.
How do you plead to this indictment? Guilty or not guilty?
Nicht schuldig.
Waldemar
Nicht schuldig.
Heinz Schubert. And how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Nicht schuldig.
We are now ready to hear the presentation by the prosecution.
This was the tragic fulfillment of a program of intolerance and arrogance. Vengeance is not our goal, nor do we seek merely a just retribution. We ask this court to affirm by international penal action man's right to live in peace and dignity, regardless of his race or creed. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law. We shall establish, beyond the realm of doubt, facts which, before the dark decade of the Third Reich, would have seemed incredible. Courts will show that the slaughter committed by these defendants was dictated not by military necessity, but by that supreme perversion of thought, the Nazi theory of the master race. We shall show that these deeds of men in uniform were the methodical execution of long-range plans to destroy ethnic, national, political, and religious groups which stood condemned in the Nazi mind. Genocide, the extermination of whole categories of human beings, was a foremost instrument of the Nazi doctrine. Sir Hartley Shawcross, the British prosecutor at the international trial, pointed out that the right of humanitarian intervention on behalf of the rights of man trampled upon by a state in a manner shocking the sense of mankind has long been considered to form part of the law of nations. German law professors, too, declared this in their writings. The jurisdictional power of every state extends to the punishment of offenses against the law of nations, quote, by whomsoever and wheresoever committed, end quote. It is therefore wholly fitting for this court to hear these charges of international crimes and to adjudge them in the name of civilization. The nature of the charges. The charges we have brought accuse the defendants of having committed crimes against humanity. The same acts we have declared under count 1 as crimes against humanity are alleged under count 2 as war crimes. The same acts are, therefore, charged as separate and distinct offenses. In this, there is no novelty. An assault, punishable in itself, may be part of the graver offense of robbery, and it is proper pleading to charge both of the crimes. So here, the killing of defenseless civilians during a war may be a war crime, but the same killings are part of another crime, a graver one, if you will, genocide, or a crime against humanity. This is the distinction we make in our pleading. It is real and most significant. To avoid at the outset any possible misconception, let us point out the differences between the two offenses. War crimes are acts and omissions in violation of the laws and customs of war. By their very nature, they can affect only nationals of a belligerent and cannot be committed in time of peace. the crime against humanity is not so delimited. It is fundamentally different from the mere war crime in that it embraces systematic violations of fundamental human rights committed at any time against the nationals of any nation. They may occur during peace or in war. The animus or criminal intent is directed against the rights of all men, not merely the right of persons within a war zone. I see there's another objection coming. I'll continue the quote later.
Dr. Bergold für Bieberstein.
Exhibit 31. Continue.
Dr. Heim für den Angeklagten Blobel. Herr Präsident, ich beantrage diese eidesstattliche Versicherung des Angeklagten Blobel.
Object to the affidavit by defendant Klobel. Document number 3824, only to be permitted under the condition that Mr. Waffenberg, who took this affidavit, may be interrogated, may be cross-examined. In this examination...
That's an inevitable right of every defendant.
Mr. Glancy will now read part 1 of the opening statement.
On 22 June 1941, with no previous warning, Germany invaded Soviet Russia. The Einsatzgruppen, already alerted, fell in behind the marching columns of the Wehrmacht as an integral part of the machine constructed for swift and total war. Within a space of 3 days, the training grounds in Saxony were empty, and all Einsatzgruppen had entered upon the performance of their various missions. The tribunal will recall how rapidly the Wehrmacht overran vast territory in the early months of this aggression. All these thousands of men, women, and children killed had first to be selected, brought together, held in restraint, and transported to a place of death. This was accomplished by special orders to report and by manhunts. It was followed by concentration of the victims under guard to be transported to a place for execution or at the abattoir itself. That it already contained about 1,000 people. I looked for the man who did the shooting. He was an SS man who sat at the edge of the narrow end of the pit, his feet dangling into the pit. He had a Tommy gun on his knees and was smoking a cigarette. The people, completely naked, went down some steps which were cut in the clay wall of the pit and clambered over the heads of the people lying there to the place which the SS man directed them. They lay down in front of the dead or injured people. Some caressed those who were still alive and spoke to them in a low voice. Then I heard a series of shots. I looked into the pit and saw that the bodies were twitching or the heads lying already motionless on top of the bodies that lay before them. Einsatzgruppe C did not fail to report the success of its work. Under the significant heading, Executive Activities, this group reported in the first days of November. As to purely executive matters, approximately 80,000 persons were liquidated until now by the commandos of the Einsatzgruppe. Several retaliatory measures were carried out as large-scale actions. The largest of these actions took place immediately after the occupation of Kiev. It was carried out exclusively against Jews with their entire families. Einsatzkommando 5 was commanded by the defendant Schultz. Only half a year after this commando had begun its activities, it was able to report a total of 15,000 executions. It was reported that the liquidation of insane Jews represented a particularly heavy mental burden for the members of Schultz's Einsatzkommando, who were in charge of this operation.